For this week's video, I knew I was only going to have time to do one video, and I was struggling with a decision to make. Should I do a full-fledged preview of Survivor Series 2014, or should I do more of a kind of gimmicky Survivor Series tribute video where I list my top 5 favorite teams in Survivor Series history? I go through all the elimination matches in the history of the Survivor Series and pick out my 5 favorite teams. Which video would be, more acceptable to you guys, and which one would you, in my mind I was thinking, all right, which one would they prefer to see? Would they prefer to see the ranked list or a preview of the pay-per-view? And I have to say, after watching this week's Raw, that show was so bad. I mean, holy Moses, that show was just 3 hours of pure, unmitigated pain. It was so bad that by the end of it, I was like, fuck it, I'm not even going to bother previewing Survivor Series. I mean, just fuck it. I don't even care anymore. That show beat me into submission and took a piece of my soul. It was that bad. I don't know if it's like the worst Raw of all time or anything like that, but I think, the show has decreased in quality so much since the build-up to Hell in a Cell, really. And I think this was just the bottoming out point for me, where I was just like, I can't take it anymore. From a fucking internet meme being the guest host to a horrible Ryback-Cesaro match, which Ryback either needs to get into shape again, because I know he was off TV for 2 months and had to have surgery and everything, and maybe he's not back to tip-top shape, but holy Moses, did he get gassed. I mean, Warrior has a bad reputation for blowing up and getting gassed, but it was like, Jesus Christ. I mean, Ryback took the crown right from him after watching this week's Raw. I mean, hot damn. So either he needs to get back into shape, or WWE needs to stop booking him in super long matches. And unfortunately, Cesaro will probably get blamed for it, but that match was just horribly awkward, and Ryback looked so out of shape. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. And, as bad as that was, then the rest of the show, you had this big angle with Team Cena getting beat up every other match, and that resulted in A, bunch of senseless matches, and B, all the members of Team Cena getting beat up and John Cena doing absolutely nothing about it. You would think after it happened the first time, he'd have been like, all right, I'm going to get my ducks in a row, and I'm going to help my teammates. And he didn't do that. So you think he would have had a contingency plan or something. So I don't know if Cena's just an asshole that doesn't care about the people he teams with, or if he's just an idiot that doesn't know anything. I don't know. He was watching Ryback's match, certainly, but he didn't take the time to watch his own teammates' match and help them out when they were in trouble. I mean, that's what, a sensible person would do. But, again, I don't know if they want me to hate John Cena for being an asshole or hate him for being a moron, whichever. It led to a horrible closing segment that just went on way too long, and it was just Cena being his most obnoxious Cena-y self. And you could just feel the crowd dying as the show progressed. And it was, that Raw just didn't do it for me. Did not do it for me, and it was so bad I've decided I'm not even going to bother previewing Survivor Series 2014. They only have 4 matches on the card. As I'm doing this, they only have 4 matches, and I just don't have the energy in me to even bother giving a flying fuck. It's pretty good. I'm sure I'll watch it and I'll go ahead and review it, but as far as previews and predictions, I couldn't possibly care any less. Ever since McMahon came back and added that stipulation to the match, of course, there's no explanation for it. And it would be fine if I believe that there was an explanation, but I don't think they have one. I really do think that they're just making this shit up as they go, and with no rhyme or reason, and people turn heel and face, on a complete whim at the drop of a hat, and that's just the world we're living in. And we got Larry the Cable Guy next week. Hooray. It's not like he's been irrelevant for 10 years or something. And then I saw a preview for Jingle All the Ways 2, and my heart just sank. Really, it's bad enough that Christmas Story got an unnecessary sequel. Now we're giving one to the lesser quality holiday classics. You're going for, the bottom rung of holiday classics, and you're going to make a sequel out of that. Okay, sure. But yeah, I'm just ranting and raving at this point. But anyway, the video I've decided to do this week is to do a list of my 5 favorite Survivor Series teams. Now, when I was a kid, the Survivor Series was really a big deal because it was a very unique idea to take all these guys and all these personalities and put them all on a team and have the two teams fight each other. And it was always interesting to see who would get paired up with who and what interesting combinations would we get and what feuds would be mixed and matched to make the elimination matches, because some of them you'd have 2 or 3 feuds mixed into one match. And it was always a lot of fun. Those early ones especially. I would say 87 was a really good one and well constructed. And then 89 and 90 were 2 that were where the team battle aspect with all the team names and everything, and the big intros with Vince listing all the teams name by name and everything. Those were probably the most fun in terms of executing the elimination tag team format. And because it was so much fun and because I have so many fond memories of it, I've decided to go ahead and go through Survivor Series' entire history and pick out my 5 favorite teams. Now, what are the criteria? I'll say the matches themselves have nothing to do with it, like the actual quality of the match. Like, Team Austin versus Team Bischoff, for example, is probably my favorite Survivor Series match ever. I thought that was just an excellent, well-worked match, and the stakes that were on the line, it felt like a big deal and everything. And it was Shawn Michaels being Shawn Michaels, and everything just came off really, really well, and I thought it was a very good, very well-worked match. Would I say either one of those teams are my favorite? And on the flip side of that, there are some teams that I thought were really, really cool and were kind of in shitty matches. Actually, one of them, which is on my list, was actually in one of my lesser favorite Survivor Series matches. So the actual match quality doesn't play into the decisions I made. Basically, what I went for was, if I saw this team on a sheet of paper and you put the poster in front of me, would it make my jaw drop to see all those personalities together? That's what I was thinking of. It's like, I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool to see this guy and this guy and this guy all on the same team. Wow, that's awesome. And that's basically the bare minimum criteria that I was going for. What unique combinations of superstars were they able to create? And in the early years especially, I thought they were able to create some really cool ones and really interesting ones. So without further ado, let's go into the list. You know, in going over all of the Survivor Series matches and trying to pick out all my favorite teams, I was shocked to find that there weren't really a whole lot of great heel teams. At least none that really stood out to me and really caught my eye. And I don't know why that is, but over the history of Survivor Series, there just haven't been that many great heel teams. But one that definitely caught my eye and one that I thought was really cool, even back when I first saw the show, were the Teamsters, the 1994 team that went up against Razor Ramon's team, the Bad Guys, and they actually opened up the show. I remember that event, and basically what they did for this team, it was Shawn Michaels who was the captain, and they basically took all their egotistical pricks, their 3 biggest egotistical pricks, which would be Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, and Jeff Jarrett, and then put Diesel and Jim Neidhart in there because they were the muscle to Shawn Michaels and Jim Neidhart and Owen Hart, respectively. And Diesel and Shawn were actually the tag champions at this point, so it made sense for them to be on the same team. So really, you had all these 3 egomaniacs all on one team, and then 2 muscly guys to kind of fill it out and back them up, and it really stood out, and I thought it was, wow, this is actually a really good heel team. And, you know, you have the family ties between Owen and Jim, and that's the reason that they're together, and you know, the tag team partnership between Shawn and Diesel, which was actually kind of worked its way into the finish of the match. And it made sense for them to be together. And overall, I thought it was a well-constructed heel team and one that had some great heel personalities that you wanted to beat the crap out of. And, you know, those 3 I named in particular, Jarrett, Owen, and Shawn, were always really good heels and really good at getting heat. And Owen would actually have one of his finest moments as a heel later that same night when he would interfere in the Brett and Bob Backlund title match, which is one of my all-time favorite matches. I mean, you want pro wrestling art, go watch Bret Hart and Bob Backlund for the WWF title from Survivor Series 94. I mean, it had drama, it had great character development. It had character motivations that I could sink my teeth into. It was very well wrestled, very athletic, just a great match all around. It's one of my favorites, but has nothing to do with the Survivor Series team matches. I just thought I would throw that one out there. But unfortunately, as much as I like the team of the Teamsters, and I think it's a really good heel team, and actually on my list it's the greatest heel team ever assembled for Survivor Series because all the remaining teams are babyface teams. It was unfortunately one of the more memorable Survivor Series matches for one very good reason and one very bad reason. The good reason is because this is the match where Diesel tore through the babyface team, just killed them left and right, and caused four eliminations on his own, and it actually ended up with a 5-on-1 advantage. Now this is where things go sour. Actually, okay, we're still in good territory up to this point, but during the match, Shawn Michaels accidentally kicked Diesel. He super kicked him. And it was the third time he had accidentally super kicked Diesel, and finally Diesel just lost his temper and just stalked down Shawn and tried to rip his head off, and ultimately Shawn forfeited the tag team titles because he didn't want to be partners with a hothead, and Diesel wanted to rip Shawn in half, and ultimately would start the build-up towards their title match at WrestleMania 11, which is not one of my favorite title matches, but at least it got a nice long build-up out of it. That part of it is fine. I had no problem with any of that. My problem was how the rest of the Teamsters tried to break up their fight, and the end result was all of them getting counted out and Razor Ramon being the sole survivor of his team, which made absolutely no sense, because if I'm Owen and Jarrett and Neidhart, I'd be thinking, well, fuck those guys, let him go. We're still 3-on-1. We can kick his ass. And at one point, Owen even started screaming, "Get back in the ring, guys, we're going to lose!" And I'm like, why don't you get back in the ring? I mean, and I don't think, again, I haven't seen this match in years, but I don't think the referee counted to 10 5 times. I think he just counted to 10 once, and that was enough. When I'm like, shouldn't every member, because Diesel, I think either Diesel or Shawn is the only legal person in the ring, and you should be counting to 10 over and over and over again. It shouldn't just be one 10 count to count everybody out, but whatever it was one of the worst finishes to any Survivor Series match, and it really left a sour taste in my mouth. Even as a kid, I was kind of like, that's bullshit. Right there. I mean, it ranks right up there with Team Piper versus Team Flair as being one of the worst finishes to an elimination match I've ever seen, which, go and watch Team Piper versus Team Flair from 91 and you'll get treated to one of the most confusing finishes. I still don't understand it, like how that happened the way it did, but and I didn't understand the finish of this match either. But as it stands, the Teamsters, very good heel team, great personalities involved, and they even got some good character work out of it between Shawn and Diesel, so it all worked out. Now, whereas the number 5 team was all about egos, the number 4 team is all about family. Number 4 on my list is the Hart family from 1993's edition, as they took on Shawn Michaels and his Knights. Of course, it was supposed to be Jerry Lawler and his Knights, but Lawler got involved in some quote-unquote legal issues. We'll just leave it at that. Bill Cosby knows a little bit about that these days, but we're just going to leave it at that from there. But Shawn had to fill in for Jerry Lawler, and that ended up being the match. But what I really like about the Hart family was that as a young kid, I didn't know the full history of the Hart family, and I certainly didn't know anything about Stampede Wrestling or, Canadian wrestling or anything like that. So it was really interesting to see that Bret and Owen had a family outside of what I had known in the WWF, and it was one of the earliest instances that they acknowledged Bret and Owen being brothers. I mean, I know they touched up on it during the Razor-Bret feud for Royal Rumble 93, but for the most part, they didn't acknowledge it all that much up until this event. And they had other brothers. They involved Bruce and Keith. And that was interesting to me because it was like, oh, there are other Hart brothers and they all know how to wrestle? That's really cool. And Stu trained them all, and there was a promotion in Calgary and everything. It was like, wow, that's really cool. And what I liked about it was that the bond between them was felt almost instantly, because it was like, I didn't need to know much about Bruce or Keith. All I knew was that they were all brothers, and it instantly made sense because of that. And just having them all come out dressed in the same colors and everything, and just this the Hart family. It was just really, really cool to me and just really stood out. And it was, for a youngster like me, it was nice to get that piece of wrestling history relayed to me in some way, while also being a very brilliant springboard into the Bret Owen feud, as Owen was the only one eliminated from the match. And because of that, he blamed Bret for his elimination, and it started his resentment towards his brother and ultimately led to the wonderful feud that they would have in 1994, which would result in some of my favorite matches of all time. So it was a great springboard for that. But as a team, just Bret, Owen, Bruce, and Keith, it was just great to see that part of Bret's outside of the WWF life, and it really fleshed him out more as a character, at least in my eyes. It gave Owen more of a platform to shine as a character, because before that he'd never really done anything of substance beyond just being in flashy jobber babyface tag teams like High Energy or the New Foundation, and wore ugly hammer pants. I mean, good God, his attire in the early 90s was not very good. But it was a great springboard for him, and it was just a great piece of wrestling history that was put on display for everybody. And that part of it I really appreciated. So, yeah, the Hart family, they're one of my all-time favorite Survivor Series teams. From the very first Survivor Series event, I have to bring this team up. Randy Savage's team, which included him, Jake the Snake Roberts, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And the reason I bring this team up is because as a kid it just blew my mind that so many very over baby faces were all on one team. I mean, if you look at this, I mean, think of the WWF in 1987, and you're looking at Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, Jake Roberts, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Those four right there. Brutus wasn't really as popular yet, and he honestly was never one of my favorites. But you look at those four, they were probably the four most over baby faces in the company underneath Hogan. Even though it made no sense for them to be a team together, because Ricky and Randy hated each other, or at least they should have hated each other going, their WrestleMania 3 feud. And Jake and Savage had a brief feud, and Roberts and Steamboat had a feud where, Jake Roberts crushed his fucking face with a DDT on the concrete. So really putting those three on a team together really made no sense. But looking past that, it was just amazing to see so many over baby faces all on one team. And that really amazed me as a kid. And for the very first Survivor Series event, I felt like this team really captured the essence of what makes... What is so intriguing about the Survivor Series is that you see all these personalities all on one team, all on one faction, trying to win a match. And it really does create a lot of dream match scenarios, which was the major appeal of Survivor Series. And for me personally, it really started with this team right here. It's like really captured the type of like, oh my God, look at who could be all on one team. I mean, Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, and Jake Roberts are three of my favorite wrestlers / personalities in the history of the business. So just those three alone, and they were the three remaining survivors on their team. Those three alone was a treat to have all three of them working together. That was awesome all by itself. But really, just to create this ultimate fan favorite team to go up against the bad guys, I thought was really cool and really captured the essence of what makes these matches so much fun. And I'll always remember watching the very first Survivor Series and just looking at that team and just thinking, wow, that's really cool. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun to have them all together. Up next is the only team on my list from the post-2000s era. Unfortunately, some of the newer Survivor Series events aren't known for really putting a lot of effort into their elimination matches. And unfortunately, they've done other pay-per-views where there are elimination matches, so even the novelty of the Survivor Series match has kind of been thrown out the window. But I guess they, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. This team in 2006, Team DX, you had D-Generation X, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Then you had the Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff. and the fifth partner to round it out was CM Punk. What a great evolutionary chain right there. You get the guys who were hot in the late 90s, which were Shawn and Triple H. Then you get like the team of the 2000s, and they were the hot young thing for a while, Matt and Jeff. And then you get the new age guy, the fresh kid off the block, CM Punk. And all of them are kind of cut from the same cloth, where at the peak of their careers, they were the cool young guys. And it's really, like I said, it's a very nice evolutionary chain there. I mean, by 2006, DX was not cool anymore. The Hardy Boys were at that point where they were getting at the end of being cool, and CM Punk was the hot new thing. But all five of them were over, and actually Punk got massive cheers that night, if I recall. So, again, having all five of them together was just such a unique visual. I mean, you think of that, like, they could create so many dream matches just out of those five guys, like Shawn Michaels versus CM Punk, or the Hardys versus DX, or Triple H versus CM Punk, which we actually got. Just such a unique fivesome, especially for that era in wrestling. And I just thought it was a very good team. Now, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember much about the match. I remember that they were all the entire team survived. I do remember that, but other than that, I don't really remember a whole lot about the match itself. But again, we're talking just how eye-catching that team is. And I don't know, like I said, eye-catching Survivor Series teams in the post-2000s are very, very rare. And this one's fantastic, and it's actually one of the better teams out there. I was just like, wow, that's a pretty awesome fivesome right there. So, yeah, 2006 Survivor Series, we got one of the greatest Survivor Series teams of all time. Yes, I am cheating. For number one, I had to give it to a tie. I couldn't pick a favorite from these two teams. And actually, doing a tie at number one allowed me to pick an extra team, which is how the Teamsters got on there. But the 1990 Warriors team and the 1989 Hulkamaniacs team, I mean, as a kid, I remember looking at those two teams and just thinking that is the coolest thing ever. And it was so perfect the way it was structured, is that you had the ultimate good guy, babyface character at the time, like the top babyface, an upper mid-carder guy that could be a main eventer but wasn't quite there, and but was very over and very cool, and a very strong, very cool tag team. Both of them followed that format. What really made the Hulkamaniacs team stand out to me, and I didn't see this event live, I didn't even know it had happened. I don't know how I didn't, but don't ask me how, I just didn't know. I was just in a video store one day, and I looked at the VHS cover of that, and I was like, oh my god, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. You got Hulk Hogan interacting with guys that I never saw him interact with. Like, hardly ever. Because most of Hulk Hogan's Survivor Series teams, he mostly went for, like, namby-pamby, goody-two-shoes, sugar-coated baby faces, like Hillbilly Jim, or Coco Beware, or Tugboat. That was on the 90s Hulkamaniac team. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Big Boss Man, those types. So to see him share the cover with someone as awesome as Jake Roberts and a tag team as awesome and as brutal as Demolition, I was like, what? That is so fucking cool. And just to see all four of them together was really, really cool. And it was a nice change-up for the typical Hogan Survivor Series team. Granted, he was the sole survivor like he always was, but it really made that match a lot more interesting to watch than, him and a bunch of jobbers that you knew were going to get jobbed out, and it was going to be just Hogan left. This is actually the best Survivor Series team that Hogan was ever a part of, and very cool just from an appearance standpoint. It was really great to see Hogan interacting with all those different personalities. And Demolition, who I think was the best tag team of that era for... or at least, maybe not, the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs are the best actual, most talented teams, but Demolition was, the crown jewel top tag team, and were really a nice backbone for the division, a nice top of the division for a few years there, and unfortunately they kind of get remembered as Road Warrior ripoffs, which I don't think is fair, but I love Axe and Smash. I don't care who knows it, and yeah, this was by far the coolest Hulkamaniac team. And I'd heard that they had planned to take it even further, like having all 4 of them walk out there and carry out a giant snake that takes all 4 of them to carry, and all of them going out there in face paint, which that would have been really awesome. That would have made them my number 1 all-time favorite team if they'd gone that far to integrate Jake Roberts and Demolition's trademarks into the overall team. I think that would have made it even better. But as it stands, I mean, that was just a very cool Survivor Series team. And just to see Hogan, like, pound guys down with Demolition, and just to see Jake and Hogan on the same side, which, again, never happened outside of this event. So I just loved it. I love the 89 Hulkamaniacs. I think they were great. And to build off of that, the 1990 Warriors were just as cool, where you had the Ultimate Warrior, who's the ultimate space cadet, crazy, insane personality, and you pair him up with the Road Warriors, who are the most badass tag team in the history of the business. That's perfect. It's just perfect. And then you had Texas Tornado to round him out. And Texas Tornado was a very cool babyface, a great mid-carder who unfortunately didn't really get a whole lot of success in the WWF. But at this point in his career, he was the Intercontinental Champion at this point. And he was very cool. And just really, it really seemed like he had a bright future. And Kerry Von Erich is unfortunately a guy that had his career and his life cut short, and was a great talent with a lot of charisma and should have been something bigger than he was. But, you know, those demons got in the way, unfortunately. And actually, you look at the Survivor Series team, it's unfortunate that Animal was the only one that's still alive out of the 4, which is really sad to think about. But back in 1990, to see these 4 all combined together, it's even better because you have the Ultimate Warrior as the captain, you have the Legion of Doom, who in other territories were known as the Road Warriors, and then you have Kerry Von Erich, who's the Texas Tornado here, but in other territories he was known as the Modern Day Warrior. So they really were a team of warriors, and I think that's really cool. And a nice little, you know, bringing history together and everything. And just a nice little tidbit for those of you who may not know, that they actually all, or 4 of them, have been known as Warrior at some point in their career. And again, it was just a very cool team. They went up against Mr. Perfect and Demolition, which, again, if there had been a 4-man Demolition team, that would probably be on this list for me. But Mr. Perfect and Demolition didn't really seem like they fit all that well together as a team. But, you know, overall, it was made for a nice match. And, again, that Warrior team was just so freaking cool. And now that I put both of these teams at the top spot as a tie, how cool would it have been to get the 89 Hulkamaniacs to face the 1990 Ultimate Warriors? It's like, man, we missed it by a year, but, you know, Hogan and Warrior had faced each other at WrestleMania 6. And if you'd gotten that 89 Hulkamaniacs team to go up against that 1990 Warriors team, I think that would have been an awesome Survivor Series match, just for the spectacle of it, just to see all those personalities together, to see Jake go up against Warrior, and see Hogan go up against Warrior again, and see Demolition go up against the Road Warriors, which happened in the Mr. Perfect versus Ultimate Warrior Survivor Series match. But just stuff like that is just, oh man, it would have been so cool to see Kerry Von Erich, one of the Von Erichs, go up against Hulk Hogan. That would have been cool. Just a lot of cool things that could have happened if that match had ever happened. But rats, so close. But just 1 year off. But as it stands, those are my 2 favorite Survivor Series team. I think they're both great. I think they're both a great combination of personalities and talents and characters and everything. And it's just 2 very cool teams that really capture how cool the Survivor Series elimination matches can really be if you really put the time and effort into making the teams feel special. And that is my list for my personal top 5 favorite Survivor Series teams of all time. And, you know, as I kind of alluded to at the start of the video, it was mostly older teams. I mean, the number 1 spot was shared by a team from '89 and a team from 1990. I went for one of the teams from the original inaugural Survivor Series event. The newest team on there was Team DX from 2006. So what was it about those older teams that really stood out more and really felt more special than, say, the newer teams? Like, let's say the Attitude Era onwards, because the Attitude Era, you know, I didn't pick any teams from the Attitude Era. And there were a fair share of, like, some foursomes that you would see in, like, the events from '99 and 2000 that we're not bad teams. There was one year where Edge and Christian and the Hardys were on the same team. There's one where the Dudleys and the APA were on the same team. There was one where the Dudleys and the Hardys teamed together. The Radicals were a team in 2000, which that one's actually a pretty good one. If I were going to do a top 10, I would probably put the Radicals on there. But there's Team WWF from 2001. To me that wasn't the ultimate. Team WWF. If I were going to make a fantasy WWF team from the Attitude Era, it would not include Kane and Big Show. It probably would have been Rock, Austin, Foley, Taker, and probably Shawn Michaels. But again, that's just me. Anyway, but what was it about those older teams that really stood out more? And I think a lot of it has to do with oversaturation of the product. Back when I was a kid and back when I watched Survivor Series, it was really cool to see all these guys interacting and forming these teams and the team names that they would give them, which they don't really do anymore. Now it's just team whoever, the team last name of whoever the captain is. It was, to me it was cool that they would come up with like team names and shit, like the Hulkamaniacs and the Warriors and the $1 Million Team and the Perfect Team and Guts and Glory and the Teamsters and all sorts of crazy stuff. I really liked it. The 4x4s, the Royal Court, all sorts of things. Undertaker's team in '95 was called the Dark Side. And I just love that stuff. And when I watched it as a kid, again, this is back in the era when most of what I had to go on were squash matches on TV, tape matches on Monday night, because I remember watching Primetime Wrestling where you just have Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, and a few other panelists sit around a round table, and then they would just show us a tape match. Then even as you get into 93, 94, 95, Raw was still doing like squash matches and stuff. So I think moving into the Attitude Era and then getting into this new era where you see guys wrestle every single week on TV. Nowadays you have a 3-hour show to fill and you see tag matches and unique pairings all the freaking time. So when you get to the point that it's time to do a Survivor Series match, they don't really feel that special because you're not seeing pairings that you don't normally see. I've seen John Cena interact with just about everybody that's on his team. Even though, like, Eric Rowan, for example, has never been his partner, but, I've seen them interact so many times on TV that it just doesn't have a whole lot of speciality to it. It lacks the coolness of seeing, like I said, when I saw Hogan, Jake, and Demolition on the cover of that cover, on the cover of the Survivor Series 89 VHS box, my jaw dropped. I was like, I have to see that. That's just too cool because you just don't see those guys interact much. You put Warrior in there with the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, and it's just like, oh my god, that's just perfect. A lot of things like that. But nowadays, you see guys have tag matches and they share TV time together all the time. So it doesn't really feel all that special when you see them clump together in a 5-on-5 or a 4-on-4 Survivor Series match. And even using the earlier examples from the Attitude Era, like, all right, you had the Dudleys and the Hardys one year, you had Edge and Christian and the Hardys another year, and Dudleys and the APA. Those are all good teams, but like Edge and Christian and the Hardys being on the same Survivor Series team, that's beneath what they were doing just a month earlier, where they were doing the Terry Invitational Tournament, which, love that pun. They were doing that whole thing, and it culminated with the ladder match at No Mercy 99. So by the time you get to the Survivor Series match, that's really, even though they're teaming together instead of going against each other, it doesn't have as much of a novelty to it as what they were doing before, which was having all these awesome tag matches and then that classic ladder match that really changed the business and changed the way ladder matches are done. So it really doesn't have the same appeal to it that it used to. That's why most of the better Survivor Series matches in the more modern era, in the post-2000s, are the ones that have a big stipulation attached to it. I hated the invasion angle with a passion, and the fact that the, quote, WCW ECW team had Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle on it. Fuck you. I mean, seriously. Chris Jericho belongs on the WCW team and the ECW team more than Kurt Angle does. I mean, give me a fucking break. But it did have, like, alright, you knew that one of the two factions was going to die after this match, so the big stipulation And if you ignore the fact that they completely boned any attempt of making a credible WCW faction, if you just ignore all that, you kind of get swept into how big the stipulation is and how big the star power is that is involved in it, and it does work very well in that aspect. So a lot of the better Survivor Series matches are the ones that have a big stipulation attached to it, because that's really the only thing that they can give you to really care. Like Team Cena and Team Authority, even though their storyline has been dog shit. Matches like Team Austin versus Team Bischoff in 2003. Matches like Team Orton versus Team Triple H in 2004, where the winning team had control over Raw for a month. Things like that. Even the Raw versus SmackDown year in 2005, the fight for brand superiority and everything. So, it's... It really, just the big stipulations are really the only way to really make these things kind of matter again, unless you go towards a TV product where you scale back, where you, hold back on having big matches on TV all the time and not give away big pairings and not have big tag matches every week and not, doing all that stuff. But when you have 3 hours to fill, that's almost impossible. I mean, again, that's one of the things I praise NXT for, but there's a big difference between filling 3 hours and filling 1 hour every week. So... it is what it is. But, just a little food for thought there. Hope you all enjoyed the list. Feel free to make your own lists if you desire to do so. That's all I have for now. Hope you all enjoy Survivor Series 2014. Of course, if you're subscribing to the network this month, it's for free. They told you that 80 times on Raw this week, so... also keep in mind you get what you pay for too. But with all of that, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will be back next week, most likely with a Survivor Series 2014 review and maybe a few other wrestling tidbits here and there. So until then, I will see you all later.